Don't leave, I know the sound quality sucks, just give me a chance. You probably saw the title of the video, A Man That Knew Nothing, and thought, how could somebody even survive without knowing anything? Well, I'll show you why even you don't know anything. Today I'll be talking about Socrates. It's important to note that Socrates never wrote anything himself, and we get most of our information from him through Plato, who could have been biased. But although Socrates never wrote a single word, he is the most influential philosopher that created Western history, and he claimed that he knew nothing. You might know of Socrates, but don't know anything about him. So imagine a man that was barefoot. He had no money, and he bothered anyone, constantly asking questions, even ones that were simple like, what is this chair and what makes it a chair? There's this story of him walking to a really important place and coming up to anyone saying, I want to talk to the smartest person. Then he walks up to the smartest person in the room and says, how do you know this? How do you know that? And constantly proves to him that he knows nothing. They famously say, well, Socrates, you are the smartest person. And Socrates says, well, I know nothing. And they say, well, exactly. Although that story might not be true, you get the point. He was a man who annoyed politicians and embarrassed a lot of experts, but also inspired an entire civilization to rethink. Today, I'll be diving into the mind of a philosopher who, although never wrote anything, changed everything. Alright, first question. Who was Socrates? Socrates was born around 470 BC. He was born in Athens, which was buzzing with art and politics and intellectual energy. But although he was born in a very fancy place, people describe him as barefoot, stocky, famously ugly. But they also say that his mind was sharp and that he would cut through everyone's ego. He would spend his days in a marketplace just questioning people. He never even sold anything. He would argue with people from politicians to just craftsmen. He believed that wisdom wasn't to answer any questions, but how to ask them. He served as an armed soldier and fought in the Peloponnesian War. Despite his appearance, he was known for his bravery and supposedly saved lives of future politicians. But what truly set him apart was his mind. He helped people care for their souls more than their wealth. He lived in poverty but still refused payment. He didn't care about status at all. He only cared about truth even if it made people uncomfortable. But this is also what led to his downfall. Now, I'm American and most of these names are Greek, so please forgive me for my pronunciation. One day a friend of Socrates visited the Oracle of Delphi, the most respected spiritual authority in Greece. And he asked, is anyone smarter than Socrates? The oracle said no one. When Socrates heard this, he didn't celebrate. This is when he said his most famous quote, I am the wisest because I know that I know nothing. This became the foundation of the Socrates paradox. I'm sorry, I keep stuttering, you're gonna have to get used to it. Socrates thought everyone pretended to be wise, and because he thought everyone pretended to be wise because they thought that they knew things, but they didn't. Like I discussed before, they didn't know anything because they thought that wisdom was the answer to questions instead of the questions being asked. Which is all philosophy really is today. It's just asking the right questions. And this really came from Socrates. Now Socrates went on a mission. He wanted to find somebody wiser than himself. He spoke to politicians and poets, but even when they spoke confidently, they still knew nothing. Poets wrote beautifully but could never explain their work. Socrates then realized that Oracle was right, not because he knew more, but because he recognized that he knew nothing. He called this ignorance. But it also led him into something called the Socrates paradox. I know that I know nothing isn't self-insulting, but it challenges the human ego. Most people cling on to their beliefs, but Socrates questioned his own. He believed that admitting ignorance opens a door to real learning. So then he said that the opposite of ignorance is curiosity. Socrates believed that if you truly understand what is good, you will do good. It leads to a radical idea. Nobody does wrong willingly. Socrates believed that every immoral action comes from ignorance. If somebody does wrong, it's because they don't understand what is truly beneficial. This means virtue can be taught, not as a moral lecture, but as a form of knowledge. Each of these subjects that I talk about, you should probably look up, because I'm only going through roughly what Socrates taught, but there's thousands and hundreds of thousands of pages about Socrates that you could read. He likely is one of the most interesting people known to man. The next thing I'm going to bring up is the fact that Socrates believed in a soul. He believed that it was your moral character, and he also believed it was the most important part of yourself. This is where the quote comes in. He famously said, "The examined life is not worth living." And he meant it literally. A life without questioning your beliefs, your values, and your purposes is like to live asleep. This is a really key detail, but I have other things that I have to get into, so I recommend you look this up. Have you ever heard the quote, "He who sees with his eyes is blind"? This also comes from Socrates. He believed that the senses deceive us. Just because something looks real doesn't mean it is real. Most people trust what they cannot touch. Socrates trusted what he could reason. He believed that truth lives in ideas, not just objects. Justice, courage, and goodness aren't things that you can hold, but he believed that they're more real than anything physical. This idea later inspired Plato's theory of forms, which is likely the most interesting and influential part of philosophy all in all. Maybe I'm biased of Plato, but I just love that. You have to look into his theory of forms. Socrates pushed people to look beyond appearances, to question assumptions, and to search for deeper meanings. Now this is where the most famous tool comes in, and is one that I use personally. It's called the Socrates Method. The Socrates Method is basically combat disguised as conversation. Socrates will approach someone who claims to know something, and they're usually an expert about this thing. Then he'll ask simple questions. They'll answer confidently, and then you ask another question. Slowly contradictions appear. Then you just let them realize that they really don't know what they're talking about. You see this all the time. Law schools, therapy, science, debate. It exposes assumptions and reveals truth. Socrates didn't lecture. He guided people to discover their own ignorance, and then rebuilt their understanding from the ground up. This made him incredibly influential. I butchered that. But it also made him really annoying. And so in 399 BC, after Athens was recovering from a devastating war, people were scared and trying to blame somebody. And Socrates, the man who questioned everything, became a huge target. He was charged with corrupting the youth and not believing in the city's gods. At the time, these were not small things. These were punishable by death. But weirdly enough, at his trial, he didn't beg for mercy. He didn't apologize or promise to stop philosophizing. Yeah, I'm sorry, I just can't speak when I'm on camera. Instead, he famously said, "I am a gift from the gods, and you're lucky to have me." Probably not the best legal strategy, because he was later found guilty and sentenced to death. His friends like Plato begged him to escape. They offered to bribe the guards, but Socrates refused. He believed that breaking the law, even unjustly, would harm his soul. So he drank the poisoned hemlock, surrounded by his students discussing philosophy until the moment he died. And his final lesson was a lesson of integrity. Socrates still matters to this day. Socrates changed the world without writing a single book. His ideas survived because he taught people how to think, not just what to think. His message is timeless. He taught to question every single thing you think that you know, and to admit what you don't know. He taught to seek virtue over wealth, and to care for your soul deeply. But what I think his most important concept was, wisdom begins in wonder. And in a world full of uncertainty and noise, Socrates reminds us to slow down and ask yourself, what do you actually know? He taught us to search for the truth, not just take it. And with all the propaganda we hear online, being able to think for ourselves just like Socrates is really important today. That seemed like the perfect time to introduce a sponsor, but sadly I have 0 subscribers. Which reminds me to tell you that you should probably subscribe. It's free and it would really help me out. Comment below what I should talk about next. Thank you for watching all the way through, even with the sucky mic. And remember, just like Socrates, to have a good day. Well, Socrates actually died, so maybe he didn't have a good day, but you get the point.